So I love this topic, guys. I'm really, really excited to share this with you. Why this webinar? So there's a couple of reasons. Number one, hormones influence exercise, and exercise influences hormones. Okay, so we're talking cycles. There is a cycle right there, and we can adjust each phase of our own individual cycles to help optimize our results. Now, as a little bit of an explanation and a caveat here, as we proceed with this information, many women in midlife are no longer menstruating. Okay, so if you're menopausal or postmenopausal, it's been that full year, that's it, you're done, then your information is going to be slightly different than this because you don't have that 28 or 29 day cycle to plan around. Instead, you're going to use, believe it or not, the lunar cycle as phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. So keep that in mind as we go through this. Week 1, phase 1 of a menstrual cycle for you ladies will equate to phase 1 or week 1 of the lunar cycle. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through. So again, why this webinar? Because number one, it's confusing enough in perimenopause as you approach it and are in it, going through it, with all the different hormone and bodily changes that are happening to you already. Okay. Add to that wanting to stay fit, wanting to avoid losing your muscle. At the minimum, you want to maintain the muscle mass you currently have, right? Moving forward, you don't want to succumb to sarcopenia or all of those aging related things that can be happening. And it's downright frustrating. I get that. I've been there. So this webinar is good because it's great news. With having the knowledge of what to do and when to do it through every phase of your monthly cycle, we can optimize your fitness results. And I'll talk about what that means in a few slides so that we can help ourselves to avoid injury, to have the best performance possible with the time we spend working out, to gain muscle rather than lose muscle, to lose fat rather than gain it, and to help reduce fatigue. And we'll talk about these a little more as we go through. And again, if you have questions, if you're watching this live, I am zooming live right now into the group. That's great. Just drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to pause every now and again to answer them. So let me just explain why I'm here. Most of you know me. If you're watching this and you don't know who I am, I'm Julie Hodge. I've been working 31 years plus now in the health industry as a personal trainer, as a nutrition coach, as a speaker, and all those fun things. So there's a list of my stuff. You can always watch this or later, but just suffice to say, I really believe in education. I believe in learning. I believe in trying to stay up on top of the latest research so that I can help impart that as well to you. I don't just share what worked for me. I share what I know needs to be special and different to work for each individual woman, and much more on that as we go through this presentation. So I got lots of certifications and stuff. I love what I do, and I'm passionate about helping women with what mainstream trainers and coaches may not be aware of or may not be sharing. Okay, so buckle up and let's do this, ladies. In this webinar, it's going to be approximately 45 minutes long. Just an FYI, if you need to leave, come back. It's going to be here and recorded for you down the road. And you can always watch the presentation again if you wish to get more out of it a second or third time. What we're going to cover today, we're going to optimize your 28 to 29 day cycle. Okay, so most of us are around that 20, maybe 29 day cycle. Of course, give or take a couple days off or add on a few days, just depending on your own unique rhythm. Okay, we're going to go through a general outline. I'm going to take each week, each phase of that 20 to 29 day cycle, and I'm going to break it down to tell you what your hormones are doing. Are they ramping up? Or are they starting to decline? What the best workouts are for those weeks. And these are things that most trainers don't know or are not educating their clients about. Okay. We'll talk about how to make your hormones more productive, when to rest, and when to push further. And I'm going to drop some big gems in here for you along the way. So why does this all matter? Well, I kind of answered that in the beginning when I said that hormones affect exercise and exercise affect hormones. So if you're working out and avoid and not tuning into that, you are doing yourself a great disservice. And if you're following what your mom, your sister, your neighbor is doing, you may also be doing yourself a great disservice. Okay, because what works then may not work for you. Hormones also affect bone density, gut health, your muscles, muscle build and muscle losing muscle. Hormones affect your brain. Okay. Hormones affect blood sugar, pretty much everything. They're the messengers in the mail. Okay. So it's really important to talk about this, especially when we talk about muscle growth and maintaining the muscle that you have. So what you have is dependent on hormones, okay? Cortisol, growth hormone, insulin, estrogen, and testosterone, all those things matter when it comes to muscle growth and maintenance. If you're going to lose muscle in midlife, which we all will, okay, we all will, but we can offset that normal natural loss through proper protein intake and strategic workouts, working with our cycle, etc. And that, of course, includes the heavy strength training, which I will talk about. Bone density is dependent upon hormones, big time, and upon nutrient absorption. We're not going there today, ladies, but nutrient absorption is huge, because if you're not absorbing those nutrients you need to build the bone, calcium, all that kind of stuff, then you're not going to get the results you want. That's something for another day. Fat loss is dependent upon hormone controlling fat storage and fat burning, and more on that as we move forward as well. So all the things we want, muscle growth, bone density, fat loss, right? Losing the belly fat around the waistline. These are all dependent upon all of those things I just mentioned. So how do we nurture the relationship we've got with our exercise and through our cycles? And that's what I'm going to hopefully answer for you today, give you a little more illumination about. If your muscles are weak, your bones are weak. If you want strong bones, you need to get strong bones. If you want increased metabolism, you need to get strong muscles. Doing so without speeding up or accelerating the aging process, okay? Because there are two different things. You can get strong muscles and increase and accelerate aging, or you can do it without speeding up, okay, your age. If you want strong muscles, lift heavy weights and eat more protein. Most women need to seriously increase their protein levels regularly to achieve protein synthesis through the day. So if you recall, I had mentioned, what do those optimal results mean? This is where I'm going to talk about what that means, okay? So when I speak of optimal results for you ladies in midlife, I'm looking at an overall picture of reduced injury, optimized muscle tone and muscle creation, muscle density, reducing fatigue, and reducing symptoms of midlife, of perimenopause and menopause, the hot flashes, the digestive issues, the headaches right before the period, the belly fat, the visceral fat, all those things, okay? So together, what does all this mean? Knowing the information is key to helping you begin to have compliance and effectiveness with the efforts you're putting behind your health and fitness and your workouts. Optimal results come when you reduce injury, optimize your muscle mass and lose fat versus the muscle, okay? Reduce fatigue. And when I say that, I mean without the ouch all the time, without constant soreness, without constantly being so fatigued that you're like, oh, I just worked out, I have to spend the rest of the day on the couch. That's not optimized results and optimal fitness, okay? And the fourth one is reducing overall symptoms of menopause or perimenopause, okay? There are 34 known symptoms. Some of us experience many. Some of us don't experience any, but all optimal results come when we are identifying and looking at and being aware of all of these things together. Before I go into what to do in each week and how and what you need to know, I want to talk about this. I think this is huge, and it would be a disservice not to mention this. So as I go through this, some women watching this, maybe you might say, well, I'm increasing my protein and I'm doing strength training and I'm doing all this stuff, but maybe you're not achieving the results. And I'm not talking about after doing this for 2 days or a week or 2 weeks, after a long-term effort. Then the truth of the matter is, you might not be doing it right for what you need. And there's a different formula that needs to be put in place. And I'm going to talk a lot about endurance, as I always do. In midlife, it becomes much more apparent that endurance is usually not our friend. So let's talk about that first before I move on. Like I said, you're doing it all, the workouts. You need a new plan if it's not working. Looking at rest and recovery, looking at your cycles, looking at how much volume might be too much volume, okay? Looking at what you may or may not be doing or eating, putting back into your body after all of the workouts that you are doing. Now, this is true for everyone, but more apparent in midlife. Endurance efforts spike cortisol, okay? They increase the cortisol. This is true for all. And in midlife, if you've spiked the cortisol response in exercise, as I mentioned, in midlife, we're at greater risk of this than at any other point in our life. It can have counter effects. So I know there are a lot of people out there who love going for their hour-and-a-half walks or 2-hour walks, 5, 6, 7 days a week, or runners who love to just get out there and run for 90 minutes and do 5Ks almost every day. You may love this mentally, ladies, but your body might be hating that endurance. And I want to put this into perspective. So too much for you could be different than someone who is going from couch to walking. So someone who is very unconditioned, who hasn't been working out or exercising, they start doing 30-minute walks a couple times or 3, 4 times a week or daily. That could be endurance for them and too much versus someone else, a 90-minute run could be too much endurance for them because it feels comfortable. They can do it. They can keep doing it. It's okay. But again, we're getting into that cortisol spike area. A second thing, along with endurance activities, is doing that with low carb dieting. Okay. So this is dangerous, especially post endurance activities like that 90-minute run or that 30-minute walk every single day of the week. If that insulin cortisol spike is not mitigated. And how do we mitigate that? Here's the trick. Again, there is an ideal and proper time and place for everything, including higher GI foods. Generally, I'm talking about carbs. I would be talking about, let's say, the white potatoes, the dates. Even a normal natural date is a higher GI. Bananas, anything that is a high GI, okay, on the glycemic index scale. These are the things that are perfect to time right after an endurance activity. So have the banana with the dates, right? Have the scoop of protein with a higher GI fruit, like a papaya or something like that, okay? Or your mashed potatoes. Right after those endurance exercise is a perfect time to get that more simple sugar, high GI carb food in to help offset your insulin and your cortisol increases. This also helps the body get ready for the next emergency, right? You're fueling back up, which could be the next higher endurance workout, okay, to help you maintain and or build the muscle. Failure to do this one, which seems like a very small thing, can actually add additional cortisol stress and increase or enhance any underlying adrenal issues, okay? So that is a big, big takeaway. If you love that endurance run or walk so much and your body doesn't like it, but you're not listening to that, you have to mitigate that. That is something that you must be doing. To think, no, I don't want carbs. I'm not going to eat the carbs. I'm not going to eat any carbs. Carbs are bad. They're not. But you think this because you want to lose weight and you want to burn the fat. It's going to have a counterbalanced effect on you. Okay. You won't burn the fat. You're in storage mode. Your body is in crisis mode. It's going to counter those efforts to build muscle, counter your efforts to balance your hormones. So don't be scared. In fact, today in our Fit Over 40 group, I posted about carbs along the lines, beyond this, along the lines of looking at something like boot camp, every day of the week, or 3 or 4 days a week, 4 weeks of the month for 6 months of the year. Or, for example, doing those 75-day hard effort programs. This is not what women in midlife need. If they do not want to be back where they're at, but in a worse state 3, 4 months from now, you want to avoid that. Is a lot of endurance. Okay, I hope I've made my point there. So anything along the lines of boot camps or long runs or walks 5, 6, 7 days a week, not a good mix for midlife fitness and hormone balance optimization. So that said, let's segue into circadian rhythms and cycles. All right. So we see these everywhere, all over. Okay. We see cycles in nature. We're about to enter another cycle. Right? Nature's about to show us how lovely it looks when things kind of die off and hibernate. We've got fall, spring, summer, winter. Those are cycles. We have circadian rhythm cycles within a 24-hour period within our own body, right? Generally, our cortisol rhythm is highest at around 8 a.m., give or take. And generally, our cortisol levels are lowest around 2 a.m., give or take again, when we're sleeping or should be sleeping. And that is a cycle that repeats, every 24 hours within our own bodies, our circadian rhythms. The moon, check out a calendar. When is the moon waxing? When's it waning? When do we have a full moon? When do we have a new moon? When do we have no moon? Okay. Like all these different things are all cycles. We have female cycles every 28 to 29 days from the moment we start menstruation until we're fully finished. So it's important to note that there are cycles all over. And they're very, very important. And because there are such cycles known to men and women in nature, there's got to be a huge significance behind them. Hence today's webinar. So when we think of our 28, 29-day cycles, we think of a 4-week plan. We can periodize our plan around that. And this is where we get into the good, juicy stuff. So generally speaking, all right, let's look at this calendar here that I'm sharing with you. Now, at the bottom, I've put menstruating week. So this would be week 1, okay? Week 1 kicks off with day 1, the day you start to bleed. This is when you may need more rest. This is when you may need to increase your calories. This is when you might need more mind-body work. As you'll learn in a few slides, our estrogen and progesterone levels are lowest during this week before they start to ramp up again, then dip, then ramp up again, and then dip. All right, this is a week to honor those changes. In week 2, this is what we consider a build-up week. Everything starts to ramp up again. This is a great week, and I'll go into this in more detail, don't worry, for things like weights and starting up with HIIT again, but non-impact. Week 3 is a great week for heavy weights. Great week to do more impact HIIT type things, maybe more circuits, maybe get a little more creative, okay? That was week 1, week 2, week 3. Now into week 4, some of us may feel heading into week 4, midway through that week, the week before we bleed, a lot more fatigue. We may need more rest. So we may already be feeling that letdown of progesterone and estrogen. But if not, this can ride right into the week you start to have your period. But this is a good week, again, to keep up with the HIIT. You may need to make those HIITs shorter this week. In terms of strength training, still a great week to begin lifting or keep lifting, but you might find you're reducing the amount of weight you lift and maybe increasing the rep ranges this week, okay, in response to what's happening behind the scenes hormonally. If there are any questions on that, you might want to save them until I go through the next 4 slides, because I'm going to give you a lot more detailed information here. Now, this starts with day 1, which is the day your bleeding starts. This can be a 2 to 3 day cycle, if you're lucky for that. Usually that's me. Or it could be 7 or so days of the week of the month, which is, a quarter of your life spent in the cycle up until you cease to have it anymore. Right? Fun times. But what's actually happening here? So I've got day 1 here, week 1. Cycle 1, if you're following lunar cycles because you are no longer menstruating, this would be, the phase 1 of the cycle, phase 1 of the lunar cycle I'm speaking of. And this is where your progesterone and your estrogen are lowest. Okay, this is before they start to rise and come and ebb and flow for the remainder of the 28, 29 days. So this is when this perfectly illustrates the point. This is not a week. If you are a woman in midlife and you're following a constant 75-day challenge or boot camp 4 days a week for 12 weeks at a time, that may not be benefiting you, because in week 1, the progesterone and estrogen is low, okay, tanked. All right. Those other plans don't account for this, but you're smarter than that. You are armed with the knowledge now to do this, because information and knowledge is key to getting that optimal health that we talked about. Now, note, interestingly enough, that men, they don't go through this 28, 29-day ebb and flow cycle. We take men within a 24-hour period, and there's a reason I share this. And they have little dips, ebbs and flows, and little fluctuations in a 24-hour period. Nothing really major. Men have their own hormones, obviously, but in a 24-hour period, they look at that day over day over day. Now, why does that matter? As a side note, because let's, say you're taking classes that have been designed by men, or there's men in it. They're not adjusting for their very changing hormones like a woman every 28 to 29 days, week by week by week, as those hormones go up, dip, rise, and fall again. So if you're trying to keep up to what a man is doing, or a man has designed your program without understanding what is happening in a woman's midlife experience, it may not be serving you. Okay. So just keeping that in mind. So women should not be working out like a man all of the time. Not to say we can't lift strong, be strong, and do incredible things. We can. Think time and place if you are still in your menstrual cycle. So here are some of my tips in week 1 when you have active menstruation. Okay. You want to honor your fatigue. Your body needs more rest. Don't fight against it. Give your body what it needs. that overall reduction of stress will be of benefit to your cortisol level, honoring your natural circadian rhythm, your blood sugar, and all of those things, not to mention your reduced progesterone and estrogen levels at this time. You can still moderately lift, but you want to avoid any high impact stuff. So, you might want to get on your bike and do some intervals on the bike, but you wouldn't want to box jump during this week for, some other reasons possibly too. So this is also a good week to think of lowering your carbs ever so slightly. We never remove them altogether, okay? But this would be one of those weeks where if you did want to look at a lower carb week, more fruits, more vegetables, things like that, you're not doing as much heavy lifting. You're not doing all the high impact HIIT stuff. You're honoring yourself with more rest. You may not need as much. This is also a great week to do things like maybe more Pilates, maybe more yoga, focus more on active recovery days, mobility, stretching, those kind of things, okay? Like I said, you can do some HIIT if you're feeling good and you're feeling rested. That's key. But avoid those high impact things like box jumps and think of, versus say faster intervals on a bike or walking outside or on a treadmill. Let's jump in and see what's happening in week 2, phase 2. This stuff is really fun. Our hormones are starting to ramp up again here, ladies. Okay. This should mean our bleeding is over. Week 2 would officially start once that happens. This is that ovulation period starting again. Estrogen and progesterone are rising again. Estrogen is very supportive of strength and muscle development gains. So that's critical and key to understand. You want to take advantage when estrogen rises. Okay. So week 2, when it tends to increase, is a great time to do heavier strength training and get back on, maybe a little more of the HIIT train. But as a note, keep your overall volume of HIITs week by week, no matter where you are in your cycle, to 45 minutes max. If you are doing a combined volume of 100 minutes, 180 minutes, what have you, of HIIT every week, again, things like boot camps or what have you, you're not doing yourself a service. It's too much volume. Remember, we don't want all of that volume, endurance, time and place. So this is a great week to get back to strength training. Heavy weights are great. This is a great week to think 10 reps or less to achieve muscle fatigue. If you can keep doing rep after rep after rep after rep, that's not muscle fatigue. And you're not serving your bone density increases or your muscle development. Heavier strength training and HIIT. But I will say in week 2, phase 2, again, keeping HIIT to lower impact. Why? Because thanks to where the hormones are at, we may be experiencing more tightness in our connective tissues. And we can also be experiencing a little bit more some lax tissue as well. So this is not the time to be doing too much high impact stuff because it's also a good time for injury in doing so. Remember, time and place, ebb and flow. So week 2, heavy weights, 10 reps or less. HIIT is fine as long as you have adequate rest between. Stick to lower impact HIIT versus higher impact HIIT in week 2. Testosterone and estrogen are at their peak. Lift, lift, lift. That's the key for week 2. Heavy rep ranges, like I said, 10 or less. And you can do heavyweight plus low impact. Again, that's just a review. Again, right here is what I was trying to say. High estrogen levels can mean more lax ligaments and lax tendons. So more risk of injury. So this is when you want to avoid the boot camp, the jumping, etc. Now, let's move into week 3, phase 3. So this is the luteal phase moving into, and progesterone generally tends to peak around day 21 of that 28-29 day cycle. Okay, so we're in week 3. Moderate lifting and HIIT is a great idea this week. So now we're into still lifting. We can still lift heavy weights. And now we can reintroduce, if you like it and your body can take it and you're conditioned enough, high impact intensity. Okay, so you're still doing your high intensity impact training, but now you can do things like the box jumps, the lunge jumps, what have you. This phase can continue to feel good and be great right up into week 4, right up until the end of week 4. But for some women, throughout week 3, as they head into the end of this phase, they may start to feel that increased fatigue. If that is you, again, moderate weights. Okay, maybe you want to start near the end of week 3 to maybe do a little more rep ranges versus 10 or less reps with really heavy weight. Maybe you're going to moderate that weight and maybe add 2 to 4 reps more and get the same muscle fatigue feeling. You might also feel you need more rest during this week. So tune in and maybe keep your own calendar to track how you're feeling and where you're at to see your own cycle over time. Generally, week 3 is still a great week for lifting moderate to heavy. Great time to do higher impact hits if you love it. Remember, 45 minutes or less total per week in volume and adequate rest. Doing a hit on Monday and Tuesday is not adequate rest. You're setting yourself up for injury. Doing a hit on Monday and doing a hit on Thursday is great. Doing strength training on Tuesday, Wednesday to rest, strength training again Friday is great. Okay. So things to keep in mind. So we're in week 4 here. Ignore that. We're in week 4 here, phase 4. Now, this is still luteal phase, and we're seeing they're not just declining, we're seeing a sharp decline of the hormones again happening this week before we start week 1 and bleed again. This is a great week as well to think about increasing calories. This is a great time, as I mentioned previously, to start looking at longer rep ranges. So instead of 10 reps or less, we might be looking at 12, maybe 14, 16 reps with a lighter weight this week for sure. We want to decrease the intensity of exercise and decrease the volume this week as needed. So if you're feeling good, yes, you can continue to do shorter hits this week. So if last week you felt great, okay, we're still in the zone. Weeks 2 and 3, I call in the zone when it comes to our fitness efforts and intensity. But this week, okay, week 4, we're kind of getting a little bit out of the zone. Maybe your hits are 10 minutes max. Maybe instead of doing 2 hits like you did last week, you're only doing 1 hit. Now, muscular endurance is still fairly high this week. So higher rep lifting, like I mentioned, is fine. But again, it's not really going to be the week for personal bests and setting your 1 rep max. I would save your 1 rep max for week later in week 2. Week 3 would be ideal. Okay, so when you're doing that in your training plan, keep those things in mind. There is, in a nutshell, how to cycle, how to fit in hit, how to fit in heavy lifting, how to fit in a more moderate, higher rep lifting. And let's talk now a little bit more about other things. So in week 3 and week 4, especially week 4, for example, this might be a great way. Think of week 4, end of week 3, week 4 as a buffet or a smorgasbord week. Okay. A great week maybe to get off and do golfing. Maybe this is a great week to go and do something different that you really like, that kind of is a little more challenging to the body, but still respects the need to have a little bit more rest if that's how you're feeling. Because there's so many things you can do, like a spinning class this week is still a great idea. Okay. If you like spinning classes, maybe those boot camp classes that you've signed up for, if possible, maybe that boot camp is okay, but maybe you're going to do lower intensity movements this week. Judge for yourself. Weeks 2 and 3, boot camp, fine. Week 2, boot camp, low impact. Week 3, boot camp, high impact. Notice the difference. But week 4, maybe you need more rest. Too much, not a good idea. And lower volume, lower impact. Okay. And of course, week 1, this is that week where you're bleeding. So really, again, a great week for active recovery, more mind-body exercises, more stretching. Okay. Things like I said, Pilates, yoga, that kind of thing. But be aware of how things change week to week. Okay. Now I will just mention as well that in the VIP 90-day plan, because it is 100% customized, it is more tailored towards looking at things like your cycle, a little bit more in terms of deep diving into understanding what that means for you, because no 2 plans are the same. We incorporate cycling, periodization of workouts. There's more mobility, flexibility, mind, body, strength, coaching around strength, muscle fatigue workouts, and that kind of thing over a 90-day period to create that behavior change. All right. So also one quick note that Stronger, the all-in-one perimenopause app that just set it and forget it, follow it every day of the month for 365 days of the year, is coming soon. Still working on that for those of you who have been asking, but lots of resources. If you do want to optimize your fitness, reducing, improving your body composition, reducing fatigue, reducing injury. Okay. All of those things we spoke about consider that VIP day, that VIP plan. Reach out to me for more details on that if you're not already in it. I would love to help. But thank you so much for watching. That is it.